opportunity for inviting me here. For me, it's very moving to be here in this country in which my grandparents were born actually 90 years ago, before immigrating to Israel, or then Palestine, in the early 1930s. So my presentation will deal with the balance between two very important interests. From one hand, application of lawyers' ethics. From the other hand, the freedom, or actually let's call it the constitutional lawyers' freedom of speech. Firstly, I would like to make two personal comments. First, I'm not representing here the opinions of the High Tribunal. Actually, quite the contrary. I represent only my own opinions, which fortunately or unfortunately are for the time being in the minority. Secondly, since I am not much of a scholar, I'm much more a practitioner, a person from the field, my presentation will deal mainly with case law. I'll try to mention at least 4 very interesting, in a way, even sexy cases, so don't go to sleep. So in Israel, we don't have a special law that deals with this issue. What we do have, we have an act that forbids misconduct of lawyers. Misconduct of lawyers in Israel is unethical. Therefore, it can be punishable. Those cases of, let's call it improper behavior, these expressions of lawyer can be divided into 3 groups, which I would like to call circles. The first circle, which I may call the outer circle, deals with cases in which the expressions of the lawyer were made outside him being a lawyer, him or her being a lawyer, outside the scope of the legal profession. The first case, which is very interesting, is the Sheftel case. Yoram Sheftel was a very, and unfortunately still is a very controversial lawyer in Israel. He is the one, by the way, who represented the famous Nazi criminal Ivan Demaniuk, who was acquitted by Israeli Supreme Court and later on indicted and convicted by the German court. He died, I think, a year ago. Mr. Sheftel is one of the most vulgar and rude spokesmen of the extreme right wing in Israel. He has his own radio program, which is the source of a lot of libel cases. One of them was presented by me as a lawyer against him. And Mr. Sheftel once was walking in the street of Tel Aviv, and he stumbled into a group of left-wing pro-peace demonstrators. And then he told them, you want peace with the Palestinians? I wish you all be dead by a terrorist attack. And he was indicted. And his case was in the end brought in front of the Supreme Court. And the question is whether this behavior, whether this expression, however vulgar, however rude, is unethical. The Supreme Court has ruled that this expression was made outside the scope of him being a lawyer, and since given the importance of the constitutional freedom of speech, it's not unethical. So he was acquitted. The second case, which falls under the scope of what we may call the outer circle, is the Shraga case. Eliad Shraga is also a very, very controversial lawyer in Israel for other reasons. He is the founder and the chairman of an anti-corruption organization. And he's also a practicing lawyer. He was interviewed by the Israeli media some years ago when our former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, whom I mentioned before, was indicted for corruption. It's important to say that Mr. Olmert later on was convicted for one account, but this interview was actually made immediately after the indictment was made. And lawyer Schwager said that I proposed Mr. Olmert to measure the size of his future cell in prison. That was a bad joke. And it's very unnice. It's not nice to say it because it undermines the very important rule of presumption of innocence. The question whether it is unethical. So this case came again via all the instances to the Supreme Court, which ruled again that he should be acquitted because it was made outside the sphere of his being a lawyer. He said it as the chairman of this anti-corruption organization. This is very important to stress that in other fields, this outer, or let's call it external behavior of lawyer is non-ethical. For example, if a lawyer in Israel doesn't pay his debts, even though those debts have nothing to do with him being a lawyer, it is unethical. We had a case like this only some months ago, and this lawyer was disbarred. This defendant was disbarred for several months. So the case law has distinguished between normal external misconduct of a lawyer and external expressions because of the importance of the freedom of speech. So now we come to the other two circles, which are much more interesting because they deal directly with expressions made by lawyers in the framework of legal proceedings, namely in the framework of him or her action as a lawyer. The second circle is what I call the middle circle. It includes expressions which may or may not be deemed as unethical according to the circumstances. The third circle, which I may call the inner circle, deal with expressions which are per se unethical, regardless of the circumstances. The argument within our tribunal and all the Israel relevant legal systems consider exactly with the distinction between the inner circle and the middle circle. I'm in the minority. I think, and I'll later on try to represent you my thesis in this issue. I believe that the inner circle should be interpreted as narrow as possible because of the importance of the freedom of speech. I'll give you a very interesting example of a case that falls undoubtedly in the middle circle. This is the Evanor case. Evanor was a lawyer, not controversial. He was a family lawyer who was sued by his former client for malpractice. Interestingly enough, the advocates that presented the other party was cleared by the police for shooting the former husband of his wife. This has nothing to do with the case. So Mr. Evanor wrote in his written summation, we have this thing in Israel, he said the chance that I was negligent is even slighter than the chance that my learned friend has killed the former husband of his wife. It has nothing to do with the case, with the pending case, so he was convicted. So again, in this case, the Evanor case is in a way a simple case because here there is no debate whether the expression is relevant. It's definitely irrelevant. But I'll give you the last case I would like to refer to is a case in which I wrote only 2 weeks ago the minority opinion. And this is the Stanger case. Chaim Stanger is again a controversial lawyer, not because he has any political opinions, but because he has a big mouth, very big mouth. And he has been in a lot of troubles. This is something which everyone knows. And in one case, actually, he has a conflict with a judge, which he decided that this lady judge is a personal enemy of him. And it was in the framework of a case in which he asked the judge to exclude herself because her committing obstruction of justice. He just wrote, I think that you should leave the bench because you are dealing with obstruction of justice, collaborating with the lawyer of the other party. He specified all the details why he thinks that she did it. She refused, so he made a petition to the Supreme Court, which was denied. Later on, he even made a case, which is still pending. He made a claim against this judge, which is still, as I said, is still pending. He was indicted for misconduct, and he was cleared. He was acquitted by the first instance. And then this case came to us. And I wrote, actually, half a year ago, I wrote the minority opinion. I believed, and I still believe, that even though he could have used better terminology, I think that he should be acquitted, because what he wrote, even though it may not be correct, I don't know, I don't think that it's for us as an ethical tribunal to dwell into the details. I think that what he wrote was relevant to the case. Again, maybe it's not true, but it's relevant to the case. Surprisingly enough, a week ago, before I came to Lithuania, and I was sure I'm going to tell you about the fact that I was able to convince my colleagues, and maybe I'm representing the opinion of the tribunal. I got the opinions of my two colleagues, and it happened that I'm not so persuasive. They decided to change the opinion of the lower tribunal, and he was convicted. And funnily enough, we have to decide on his sentence in the next future. Again, I don't want to say anything more about this case. I just presented because this case is not yet over, and surely enough it will come also to the higher instances. But again, it reflects the argument, because I believe that the inner circle, namely expressions which should be considered as an unethical per se, are only expressions which have nothing to do with the pending case, which are totally irrelevant. For example, and homophobic expressions, racist expressions, sexist expressions, expressions that relate to physical or mental qualities of a person. Any other expression, however insultive, I believe that it should be allowed, because this policy of the majority face or may actually create certain dangers. First of all, it opens the door for what we call selective application of the law, because, for example, in the Schwager case, it was very, very clear that lawyers in the ethical committee, this is the body that presents the indictment, they were very eager to indict him, not to convict him, because they cannot convict him. It is for us to convict. But they are the prosecuting body. They wanted him to be indicted. Whereas in other cases, other lawyers who say things which are even worse are not indicted. The second danger that I see is what I may call the chilling effect. A lawyer should be polite, but a lawyer, at least in my country, and I'm coming from a common law system, is someone who goes to war every day. He has to fight against his opponent, he has to fight against the court, sometimes even against his clients. This is a profession in which the freedom of speech is fundamental. And if a lawyer will feel threatened to say things, then I think that the mere essence of democracy can be impaired. Therefore, I do believe that in this balance between those two basic interests, the interest of democracy is that the freedom of lawyers' freedom of speech shall be limited as less as possible. Thank you.